Someone just whispered this morning that it's a good day. Indeed, it is a good day. 25 degrees here in Abuja, bright and sunny, and the chill that we felt yesterday is somewhat missing this morning. But welcome to Sunrise Daily. I'm Neota Igwe.
Good morning and welcome. I am Kayla Magua. America decides today. Everyone has been talking about it. I don't think I've really slept. I've just been watching to see, because like a lot of people early voted. 82 million people have already done early voting. It just kept making me think about our electoral process, but I'm sure that's a conversation that we'll be having another time.
Before that, a lot of people have been voting even before today. Some have mailed in their votes, especially those who are outside the country. So it's, as you said, we need to look at our electoral system again. Now, where are we going to today?
We are going to Tumbengiwa this morning.
Okay.
Yes, indeed. We are going to Kano. Good morning, Kano. Kano City, to be exact. In fact, what I'm looking at there, that place looks like Yumsuk. Yumsuk, that's Yusuf Maitamasule University in Kano.
Okay.
Yeah. It's owned by the Kano State government. It's a lovely institution. But there, Kano City, busy Kano. Kano was in the news recently. The governor was asking that the arrested and arraigned protesters who had committed crimes, really, at least for them, in his state, should be brought back to the state. And actually ties to what I've heard a lot of legal luminaries say.
Yeah.
You know, that this case should have been handled
at the state level.
State levels. Why did they bring all of them to Abuja? But someone explained to me that it was because of the kind of charges that were brought up against the boys. But all of that is history now. The president has ordered the Attorney General of the Federation to ensure that those boys are released. Now, that caused a bit of a stir. I remember we were in the newsroom when he came out. We were like, Mr. President, can you do that? You got to override the system. But then not too long after that, we now heard a statement from the president where he's asking the Attorney General of the Federation to withdraw that case. So that's the procedure. The Attorney General is going to be withdrawing that case and asking the humanitarian minister to look towards the welfare
of the children.
Of the children. So it's a lot to be learned, a lot of lessons to be learned. But Kano City there, and I was correct, that is Yumsuk, and the school there, smack in the middle of Kano. Very busy city. This is one of my favorite places in Nigeria, really, and it's because I started my journalism career in Kano.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, that was not too far from Yumsuk. Is a place called Farm Center, and that was where I started on radio, in Farm Center there.
You know, for me, Kano is this is nostalgia anytime I think about Kano. My first trip to Kano was quite interesting. We got there late at night. I mean, all the way from University of Nigeria to Kano. We were going for an event. We got there late at night and it was cool. So I had this feeling like, oh, it's all going to be cool until I woke up in the morning at 6 a.m. The temperatures were way up there. I just mentioned 25 degrees centigrade this morning in Abuja, but the heat and the temperature that particular day, I think, was around 35, 37 degrees centigrade. And as at 6 a.m., it was, oh my goodness. But then we went around town, got up early, got a taxi just to see the town. Beautiful, historical city of Kano. And then we made the mistake, at that time we had cassette players, not CDs. Made the mistake of pulling out one of my favorite cassettes from the radio and dropping it on the dashboard, going out to go get something in the store. By the time we came back, the cassette had melted on the dashboard.
Welcome to Kano.
So anytime
you'll learn. You'll learn from the heat.
So anytime I think about Kano or visit Kano again, that picture of the melted cassette comes to mind. But hey, it's a beautiful city.
Of course, and very historic.
Historical
the
city.
Second largest in Nigeria. Over 4 million citizens live in Kano, and it's 449 kilometers square. I mean, we were talking about the weather. It's 20 degrees in Kano this morning.
20 degrees?
20 degrees, not so bad.
So it's even cooler than here in Abuja.
Yeah, it's cooler this morning.
Yeah.
It's cooler in Kano than it is in Abuja. But you know, there, our skyline, if you are from Kano, You're from Tumbengiwa, the belly of the elephant. Good morning to you, and thank you, Kano, for giving us that view this morning.
Indeed. And so today, what are those things? What's going to be happening today, Kayla?
Well, we have some business coming up today. In fact, it's one that I personally am interested in. I want to be able to, listen in on what they're talking about. The controversy around the tax reform is going to be discussed today. So I think we're going to be having our business segment talking about tax reforms. Interestingly, tax reforms have been on our minds for quite a bit, following those 4 bills that the president sent to the National Assembly and the controversy around those 4 bills. Of course, we did hear NEC saying, they wanted it withdrawn, but the president stood his ground. He said, look, let the process follow. Let's
go through the entire process.
Let's go through the entire process and see if it works out. But I think it's one that really has the potential to grow our country, but we do know that it's a double-edged sword. We had a guest on the show at the time who said, look, it's good and it's bad. But, we are in a period where everyone is talking about austere measures and honing in on internally generated revenue and how we can grow our country using our subnationals. In many ways, our subnationals have been having a great time, relaxing.
Really?
For many subnationals, not all of them. There are subnationals that have been working very hard, but then there are some that really need to look inward, and see what they can do. Create avenues where more taxes can be collected, and if that is tied to how you get revenue, then that's important.
Well, Kayla, maybe some people will shoot me hearing what I'm about to say, but I'm not the one that said it. Okay. Go back. Former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom actually said it, Margaret Thatcher. She said, no nation's economy grows by taxation, by taxing its people. Yeah. So we can't tax the people to grow our economy.
You can't tax into development.
You can't tax to development. So what do we do? Is this a way to go? I understand a senator saying that there are no new taxes. It's just to enforce the ones that are there. Yeah. But there are other areas that can be taxed. I mean, housing tax. In Abuja, for instance, and the estate developers and surveyors will tell you that about 55% of the houses in the Abuja city are empty and locked up, and the rents are high up there. So would the government consider taxing those empty houses so that those who own them can let them out and let people get a place to stay?
Because I was looking at the FCT administration and their taxation plans and things that they're about to do to generate more revenue. It's actually a recent conversation. I think on Data in Abuja this week is one of the things that we're going to be talking about. So they're going to be implementing Section 85 of the Property and Environment Tax Assessments, called PETA, Section 31 of the FCT IRS Act, and the introduction of capital gains tax. So there's a lot of things that the FCT administration said they're going to be honing in on to improve the tax welfare of the FCT.
Would that make it easier for the low-income earners, or are they all going to be carried? Are they going to carry the weight as well?
Well, we don't know. We'll be having that conversation at some point this week.
I hope so. It's beyond the conversation.
But yes, for Business Morning today, it's going to be about the tax reforms and what they mean and who they impact and how we go forward, because the president has dug his feet down and said, let the process, I'm not going to pull it out.
Let the process go. All right. So let's go from what's happening today. Let's go and see what some of the papers are saying in their headlines, and we will be back.
We begin a review of the newspapers this morning with this headline from the Nigerian News Direct. How Nigeria's debt service to revenue ratio dropped to 65% in 17 months. More on that from page 13, and that statement is attributed to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. We move on now to the Nigerian Tribune. Security agencies involved in minors' arrest, prosecution to face probe. More on that from page 3, and that's coming as President Tinubu directs the release of the young detainees and asking the humanitarian ministry to take charge of their welfare. We move on now to the Guardian newspaper, and it's taking a look at world politics. World leaders and nations anxious as the United States decides Harris-Trump's fate. More on that from page 6 of The Guardian this morning. The Daily Times kicks off with Tinubu ordering the release of miners involved in the End Bad Governance protest. You can get more of that from page 2 of the Daily Times. The Daily Trust is leading with Falana seeking compensation as Tinubu directs release of miners. The biggest story today in all of the papers, apparently. President orders investigation and prosecution of officers behind that action. The Bauchi State Governor states that the arrest was inhuman to begin with, and the Attorney General of the Federation to take over and discontinue the case today. More on that from the Daily Trust newspaper. And the Blueprint is leading with Tinubu directing the welfare of the NBAC governance juvenile protesters. Despite hardship, we've crushed debt servicing profile from 97 to 65%, according to the federal government. On the bottom plate of the New Telegraph, we have no going back on subsidy and forex reforms, according to the Minister of Finance, Mr. Wale Edu. More on that from pages 5, 7, and 28 of the New Telegraph this morning. The Vanguard. And bad governance. Tinubu orders the Attorney General of the Federation to free miners facing trial. Meanwhile, the All Progressives Congress is kicking as Atiku tags Tinubu's economic policy prescriptions shambolic. More on that from the Vanguard this morning. Business Day. How Trump or Harris's win will shape Nigerian markets. One to look out for. Banks, 1.2 trillion loans at risk on inflation and interest rates. On that from the Business Day. And this Nigeria, release the kids now. That is one of the headlines we're seeing in almost every newspaper today. And the president is speaking to new ministers. You'll be criticized, abused, but be focused. I've stopped scavengers of nation's resources. That is from the This Nigeria newspaper this morning. And those are the headlines from the newspapers this morning.
And so you see some of those dailies there, some of them, just for me, the ones that stand out for me, again, it's from the Vanguard. And it's one of those tiny ones that you hardly see. The Vanguard newspaper, above the nameplate, the president to the ministers, telling them, you will be criticized, abused, but be focused. That story continues on page 9. The question I would ask, and many will ask, is focused on what? On the task at hand, on their deliverables? How much are they doing in terms of deliverables? What are they going to be delivering? What's the timeline? It's one of the things that some will say is a problem in leadership in Nigeria. Timelines are not clearly stated. Okay, we're going to go here, and this is the time frame within which this will be done. So is the president giving them timelines on the things that they're going to deliver on so that they can pass that on to, as some will say, they are only superintending over a team that is doing the work, and those are the civil servants. They are the ones running the machinery of the different ministries. So the minister is only just supervising what they are doing. So what's the timeline he has so that he can pass it on to the team and say, hey team, the president has mandated us to deliver on this within 6 months, within 1 year. So you have 2 months, you have 3 months to deliver on this. So that's one of the things that stand out. Of course, you saw the story about the End Bad Governance protest and the president's directive to the Attorney General of the Federation. But you see the reaction of a human rights lawyer. Terminating treason charge against minors is not enough. That's coming from Femi Falana. He said it's not enough to just terminate the treason charge against the minors. There are other things that need to be done. And so we go to page 5 to get more on that story, but I'll leave it there for the Vanguard.
I'm looking at the Leadership newspaper this morning. We were hit with this very sad story yesterday. Page 7 of the Leadership newspaper actually has all the details there. But the EFCC arresting Okoa over the alleged 1.3 trillion naira fraud. Page 7 has more on that story. And it also brings me to this headline here that I'm seeing also from the Leadership newspaper, the Sultan of Sokoto saying God will handle bad leaders. But we'll call them out so that God can see them very clearly. We have to be able to have some kind of hand in this. It is embarrassing, the kind of situations that we have to go through. But my major take today is on the U.S. elections. In fact, the leadership is taking a very interesting view this morning, how an election 10,000 kilometers away concerns Nigeria and Africa. And they're looking at a lot of things, where the candidates stand, what global markets are saying, where the immigrants are standing, what it's going to be one of the tightest polls. The mood in the world capitals, everyone is waiting with bated breaths, really, because, you know, when America sneezes, a lot of us catch cold. So we need to understand what's going on and how this election is going to impact their foreign policy, which will, in other words, affect us as a people. Remember, we do a lot of business with that country, and we have a lot of things that we depend on the United States for. So we're watching to see how all of that pans out. But it is election day in the United States. The United States decides a make or mar presidential poll. Harris versus Trump. Where do you stand? What are your thoughts? You can talk to us on YouTube. You can send us messages. We'd like to hear what your stand is on this election, and what you think is going to be the benefit to the Nigerian people, depending on who wins that election. But this story, page 4 of the Leadership newspaper, that's what we're looking at it from today.
Let me just take this last one here from Daily Trust, and it ties into what, Kayla, you said. Let's call them out so that God can see them clearly. Well, the Sultan's advising against that. His Eminence Adipec III is saying, stop castigating leaders, allow God to deal with them. That's just below the nameplate of Daily Trust there. It says, stop castigating leaders, allow God to deal with them. Question is, you need to be able to differentiate between castigating and calling them out, so that God will see them clearly and deal with them. So maybe you're aligning with the Sultan here. You're working together to make sure that they are seen, and then
we have to help in the war. From time to time, we have to bring out them so that our general God would help us to act fast.
If you get to page 7 will give you more on that story. But what I mentioned earlier from Vanguard newspaper, what the human rights lawyer and senior advocate of Nigeria, Femi Falana, was talking about, says detention. Falana seeks compensation as Tinubu directs release of minors. So he's asking that don't just drop the charges, the treason charges against them, compensate them. Compensate them. And so I hope all of this will not just be swept under the carpet because the president has given the directive. This whole process, whether discharge and acquit or whether you're going to prosecute some of them, whatever it is you're going to do, it needs to be followed through and through. But as we always say here, communicate, let the people know what's going on. It doesn't reduce your power as a leader. Go to page 4, you get more details on that. And that's it from Daily Trust, and a look at what the headlines are on some of the dailies. Sunrise Daily will be back in a moment to pick up our conversations. Don't go there.
Welcome back. We are going to touch on a particular topic that has to do with oil and gas, but we'll get to that in a bit. We do have to touch base with our correspondent, Dele Omoyeni, who is in Abu Dhabi at this moment for the Adipec conference. It's a decarbonization conference, and it's the biggest oil and gas energy event in the world. Dele, good morning. Can you hear us?
Yes, indeed, Kayla. I can hear you. Good morning. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Talk to us a bit about Adipec 2024 and what you're seeing in that particular conference at this moment.
Okay, so the Abu Dhabi International Petroleum Energy Conference is the biggest energy event in the world, as you have started, Kayla. And this year is the 40th edition. It started in 1984, actually. So it's 40 years, this is the 40th edition. And it's concentrating on two things majorly. First is artificial intelligence and how it affects the oil and gas industry. That's the elephant in the room, actually. Next to climate change. A lot of people are thinking about how AI will disrupt that system. This conference is also focusing on decarbonization. This is climate change as well. And a lot of people talking about the fact that the U.S. elections might impact this sector. If it goes the way of the Republicans or the Democrats, everybody has their own way of affecting this particular industry. But much more important for Nigeria, because Nigeria will just have a big day today. We're expecting one of the ministers of Petroleum, specifically for gas, security. Also, the Group Chief Executive Officer of the NNPCL, Mr. Minikari, is expected to make his speech today, as well as the Executive Vice President, Gas and New Energy, also making a speech today on hydrocarbons. Now, here's the catcher, Taylor and Nelson. The truth is, in as much as the UAE has about 100 billion cubic barrels of crude reserves and 250 trillion cubic feet of gas reserves, guess what? Abu Dhabi and the UAE is moving away from just hydrocarbons because they want to protect their climate. This morning, I rode to this conference in a car powered by hydrogen. And yesterday, I rode into this conference in a car powered by CNG. So it's not just enough to say we have all the gas assets or the oil assets. Everybody is finding a way to move away from hydrocarbons to not using that.
You know, Dele, this information you just shared now paints a picture of many running away from what a lot of people will say is driving the Nigerian economy, which is crude. And I do know that our government has continued to harp on the need to build up our gas inventories and productivity in the gas area. But yes, you said Nigeria has a big day today. So what do you think will be taken away from this conference at the end of the 7th?
Okay, so like I said, a key issue, a very vital issue, and that's why the EVP gas of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited is going to be speaking at this conference, is that CNG cannot be the only transition fuel. What about hydrogen? What fuel for Nigeria is CNG, and that's why the government is making huge investments in terms of powering cars with CNG. But there are other much more cleaner ways of transiting, like hydrogen and electric cars. So Nigeria has to look at all these other sources as well. The truth is that even here in Abu Dhabi, a lot of cab drivers complain about how expensive PMS is. So that's the way it is everywhere in the world. But of course, the argument will be that the per capita income of the UAE is about $49,000. So it's a country of rich people, so they perhaps can afford petrol gas. But even at that, they are also transiting. Most of their public vehicles run on either CNG, hydrogen, or electric. Is that Nigeria cannot only depend on CNG as a transition fuel. It needs to look at other sources as well. Very importantly. Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you very much, Dele. Thank you. Do enjoy the conference as much as you can, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you very much.
All right, we'll get back to our guest, Mr. Peter Esele, who's a former president of the Trade Union Congress and former president of Pengason. Mr. Esele, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start off with that. I'm sure you heard our correspondent who is in Abu Dhabi for the Abu Dhabi Petroleum Conference, Adipec, talking about the need to bridge the gap, transiting from carbon products, carbon fuels to non-carbon fuels. What's your take on Nigeria's transition process so far?
I think Nigeria's transition so far is still at an infancy stage, because before you want to transit, you must have a program, you must have a plan, and the whole plan must be holistic in nature. It's not for you to say, oh, we are doing CNG, or we're going to do an electric vehicle, or whatever we want to do. The fact is that we must take it from a point of what is our interest, what is our goal. What we are doing at the moment is that we are being driven by external factors. No, you had a rainfall in Spain that was supposed to be for 8 years, having an 8 hours. In 8 hours, over 217 people dead in Spain. So you have Europeans who are very serious about climate change, but they are taking it from their own interest. So what is Nigeria's interest? So any other country in the world, whatever they are doing is vis-a-vis taking from their core interest. What is our core interest in all of this? Is it that we want CNG, or is it that we want to transit from fossil fuel because it is in our own interest? So until we are able to identify that, that is when we are able to build a program around it. Or else we will just continue as usual, be speaking the English that is being spoken in the West, and we start repeating it here without fully understanding the implication for our survival.
I want to be able to get your thoughts. What are those implications on our survival that you think are being ignored in the conversation of our conversion from PMS to other sources of energy? What are we missing out in the conversations?
Okay, now the first thing we need to identify is that fossil fuel will still be around. Your correspondent just talked about what is going on, has been on for the past 40 years. So let's ask ourselves, for the past 40 years, what have we been planning? We know this is coming up, but we've not had any plan. So what we have at the moment is that fossil fuel is still going to be around in 2050. The goal is that zero carbon emission by 2050. That's the goal. So now we're in 2024, 26 years more. What is our plan to move from point A to point B? We're actually a gas country. We have more gas reserve than crude oil that we talk so much about. So our plan should have been, first, we are talking about CNG. If we know that we're going to take away subsidy, from 1999, there's been battle for subsidy removal by successive government. Now, the subsidy has been taken off. What you would have imagined is, first of all, is that are we going to do CNG? Is it going to be, we're going to move people, goods and services from point A to point B using CNG? Your correspondent made references to hydrogen. If you go outside, you're going to see a whole plateau of different methods or different ways that they think they can move people from point A to point B. So it's for us to identify, is it CNG? Are we going to use gas? Ordinarily, people are even talking about kerosene. We don't even need all of that. All we need to do is that as a gas country, we have to ensure that everybody have access to gas, cheaper, and it's cleaner energy. So we must, first of all, have a government policy that will drive it. What you have in Abu Dhabi, you have in UAE, is that it's a government policy that has taken from 10, 20, 15, 20, and 30 years upward. So to plan, this is how you want your country to look like in 30 years, you must be able to envision what you want to see. And what we have right now, we don't have any plan. We just still, that's why I use the word, we are still at the infancy stage.
All right, let's move on now to the story, really, of the day. The Petroleum Products Retail Outlets Owners Association of Nigeria, I think they're called Petron. They had a press release yesterday that's caused a lot of ripples. In fact, we've seen a response from Aliko Dangote following the release of this one. Petron will sell far less than the current selling rate of PMS in Nigeria when granted import license by NMDPRA. And we did hear the response from Dangote saying anything that's cheaper than what I'm selling is substandard to what I'm selling. Let's talk a little bit about this impasse and what you think about Petron wanting the license to import, and they're promising that it's going to be cheaper. What are your thoughts on this?
I think that's a normal way that any business will want to talk, because if you want to get import license and you say that, then that is very catchy and that is attractive to any government, to anyone. If Petron is saying they will sell cheaper, let them tell us how they intend to do it. Between the Aliko Dangote refinery and Petra, first thing we must identify is that they are both businessmen. The Dangote group wants to make profit. They've taken a lot of loans and there's debt that they have to pay. And Petron, they are also there to make money. They want to make business. In business, they also want to make profit. So now that's where government comes in. That's the reason why we have government. And that's where the regulators also come in. If Petron says they will sell less, let Petron tell us how are they going to do it. Because I saw their press statement, it was vague. They didn't tell us how they are going to do it. Dangote gets his refinery, is being sold to him in Naira, but again, the actual price is in dollars. So they convert to Naira. So if Dangote says this is how much they are going to sell, and Petron says they are going to sell lower than that, Petron need to tell us how they are going to get to that.
I mean, sorry about that. I want you to be able to get what, because they also responded to Dangote, and I want to read that. There's a publication by Dangote Refinery that Petron will import substandard petroleum products is not coming as a surprise to stakeholders because such is his usual gimmick to maintaining a monopoly. This talk about monopoly from the Dangote Refinery has been going on for quite a bit. Is this just normal, josting to be able to get, what they want, or is there some kind of truth to these accusations? Is there fear of a monopoly by the Dangote Refinery, and Are we in danger of getting substandard products from Petroleum if they get it from other sources, as Dangote has said?
Now, first thing, I'll take you back to what you just said. They're actually jostling for position. Dangote, just like I said earlier, Dangote is a businessman. He wants to make as much profit that he can make. And same goes for Petroleum. So this is where government comes in. And the government I'm talking about here are the regulators. Because I also read Dangote's statement, even accusing NMDRO that they don't even have the laboratory to know what is standard or what is substandard. So that's a very huge allegation against NMDRO, which of course they had to now come out to let us know whether they actually have the laboratory to do that or not. And then the other aspect we also need to look at, yes, there is fear of monopoly. Yes. If it's possible for Dangote to have monopoly, Dangote will want to take it with his both hands, with both of his hands. But we need to ask ourselves some basic here. Dangote was already far ahead. He had planned for situations like this while everybody was sleeping. Now, I'll take you back to PIG bill. That's the act. The act states, is very clear. You cannot import petroleum products except the local refiner now inform the government that they cannot meet the local demand. It's a law. So Dangote can also use that to go to court to challenge and to stop whoever is going to import product. And that's where government needs to come in. Government needs to come in to look at what is in our national interest, what is in our national security interest, what is also in our energy security. So government must find that balance between profit and service to the people. That is the only way, whatever is going on between Petroleum and Dangote refinery. But to all fellow Nigerians, it's very clear what is at play here is capitalist jostling for position.
Mm. But you mentioned the petroleum industry law and what it's supposed to do as regards the industry. Are there portions of that law that are not being followed through? Because there are many who are concerned about the state of Nigeria's petroleum sector, even with the laws. There was a time there the argument was that the laws are not modern and strong enough to guide what's going on in that space. But now that there's a new law, we have the PIA, there are others who are concerned that it is not being effectively implemented. The unbundling, for instance, of the NNPC has been unbundled, but the different parts of that unbundling are not taking their stand. So at the end of the day, we're almost back to that one institution space where we were before the PIA.
Now, no law is perfect. You know, the first thing was we needed to look at the industry. It started from Petroleum Industry Bill, before it now became PIGB, then PIA. No law is perfect, but it's in the process of enforcing and managing those laws that we now look at there are areas whereby there are inadequacies, and then we gradually go ahead to correct it. So it is in the practice that we notice that there are changes that needed to be made. Now, the NNPC unbundling, the NNPC it's more like six and a half a dozen. There's really no change. I don't really see as much difference how NNPC operates now and how it was operating in the past. It's still the one importing product. The difference here now is that NNPC is not giving us prices, and the petroleum subsidy is gone. That is the only difference that I can point at what NNPC is doing. So what we now need to ask ourselves is, how do we strengthen it? How do we make sure that this act is further strengthened? And then we can make a series of amendments based on the way we are seeing those who are practicing these laws or who are carrying out certain parts of the law. And if we feel that it's not being done properly, I think the executive arm of the government can still go to the National Assembly and seek further amendment.
Mm. But should we be at that space at this point in time?
Yes, laws are dynamic. So whatever you think is workable for you, whatever you think adjustment that you think you have to make, you just have to go ahead.
I asked that question because when one looks at the state of our industry as we speak, with players like you who've been there, well, there are those who will say that, okay, you, for instance, now you've stepped aside, you've gone into politics. But there are others who have been there, and they are still there, playing seriously in that field. It's not just about the laws. It's also about the benefits to the nation and to her people that's supposed to come from these resources, natural resources. And as you said, Nigeria is a gas country. Nobody's even looking in that direction. We're all focused on the crude oil. but there is a gas. The Dangote refinery is not the only refinery that is at play here. There are government-owned, state-owned refineries, and then there are private refineries. But nobody's even talking about all of that. We're all focused on this private refinery, the Dangote refinery. Is that where we should be?
That should be the way it should be. You see, the fact here is that we need to ask ourselves, if you say Dangote is being monopolistic, then you should ask yourself, what happens to the government state-owned refineries? Because if the state-owned refineries are functional, all this jigsaw, all this game that is being played will not be necessary. And that's why you see I'm advising Nigerians, in the last couple of months, Dangote suddenly became an activist, moving from one media house to another. And I was very clear with certain individuals, we had conversation. I said, yes, now the guy, he sees certain things that he needed to address because he's feeling the pinch because he had debt to pay. And then that's also why at a particular time, Dangote also went to court suing the NNPC because NNPC wanted to start importing petroleum products. So what we must ask ourselves is why are the local refineries or the state-owned refineries not working? Because if that was working, we would not be where we are now. And then we also need to give kudos to Dangote because he has proven that, yes, refineries can be built, refineries can be made to work. But what we also need to check is that he will not, because he wants to pay his debt, and at the end of the day, it makes life very difficult for Nigerians. So that's why I keep emphasizing the need for government intervention to look at this and ensure that the laws of the country are respected, and so that you don't have privatization that I will say, let me use what we used to say in the labor movement, privatization that has no blood.
But Mr. Saleh, you're one of those who used to campaign that government has no business in business. So why would you be asking the government to step in?
No, I am not one of those. I never said government has no business in business. What I always said is that, my statement has always been very clear, is that government must have a stake. Take, for example, I have always talked about the NNPC refinery being privatized on 51-49. The 49, if government is taking 49 out of it, the 49% gives government a substantial amount of control. Now, in NNPC, in Dangote refinery, government was going for 20%, and suddenly government reduced theirs to 7% at the end of the day. Now, one of the reasons why, even when I was Pengassi president or TUC president, we keep emphasizing on quasi privatization in the sense that you have government owning 49%, while the operators owning 51%. That is what is happening in LNG. The operator runs the business because they understand the day-to-day running of business. But whenever government is involved in totality, there is always the other side of government, which is political patronage. And once you start having that, then the business will start going down. That is why we always emphasize on 49-51. It's working. LNG model is working. We've never had problems with LNG, and government is making dividend out of what is happening there.
I mean, I want to be able to get your. I want you to give an expert opinion on it, because we just got a message from someone saying, well, even if Dangote is targeting monopoly, because we're seeing that story right now, that he's stifling competition and targeting monopoly with the things that he's doing and saying recently. But the person sent us a message and said, what's wrong with monopoly if he can deliver? From an expert's point of view, what's wrong with monopoly if the person can deliver? And why should that be something that the Nigerian people should be worried about?
I think I'm very clear on that. I'm not against what he's doing. My quote was that the question came from the fact that Petran is afraid that Dangote is going to have a monopoly. I'd rather have a monopoly that is a Nigerian than a monopoly that is an American. Because first of all, if Petran is going to ask for import license, this is what is going to happen. Petran is going to have a run for the dollar, because to import products into the country, you're going to need dollars to do that. And if you do that, we are talking about 1,700 right now. We're going to go as high as 2,000 or 2,000 plus. So that will bring pressure on our FX. So if Dangote is going to be a monopoly, there are also avenues that you can check the monopoly. But one thing is very clear. If he makes product available, I think that is what Nigerians are looking for. But nobody will support a government that will encourage monopoly. No government in the world encourages monopoly. What government wants to do, or what I'm emphasizing here, is that government should ensure that a level playing field is created. But I'm not a party to supporting importation of petroleum products when we have the local capacity to meet our needs.
I mean, we've been talking about how competition and different people being involved in this business would lower the price. I mean, yes, availability is important for us, but price is also a very big issue. Until we get to the level of the UAE or Abu Dhabi, where they can have hydrogen cars and CNG alternatives, where they look at petrol and say it's too expensive, I'm just going to try other alternatives. We're not there yet. Still, for now, we are still towing this line of petrol. And the competition that is necessary for the price to be driven down is what we've all been looking forward to. It's almost as though the Nigerian has been taking in these increases, thinking, don't worry, the competition will hit and then the price will come down. Is that something that we're going to see in the recent future, in the next few months even? Or are we just going to experience this? This is just our reality. The price has gone up and that's where we are.
It's our reality. I think I'll take your last. It's our reality, as painful as it is, because we need to be aware that crude oil is bought in dollars, and if you have a weak currency to the dollar, then there's no way the prices are going to come down. So the other option is that probably the price of crude will tank in the international market, and that's the only way you are going to have probably you are going to pay a lower amount at the pump price. But for anybody to think that probably petrol is going to get to 500 naira per liter, please just bury that. It's not going to happen I don't think that is going to happen in the foreseeable future. So what we need to ask ourselves is, how do we bring first is availability of product, and then we have to increase competition. The Petron, whoever, they can go ahead and also set up their refineries. Boas refinery is likely going to come up sometime next year. NNPC refinery is also going to come up sometime next year. So we are going to have competition, yes. But that competition will not be devolved from the fact that our currency is weak and the crude oil or petrol is bought in dollars.
I mean, I like that you mentioned our local refineries, but these dates that you're giving, I'm not very hopeful anymore. Remember when they said it was going to be in August? Do you remember, Milta? They said it was August. We waited. August finished. September, October, November. We're in November. Now, Peter Esele is saying next year that the refineries will be up and running. Always planning for the refineries to be up and running. Are they ever going to be up and running, or are we just chasing our own tail in this story?
I think in one of your programs that I think earlier in the year, and when they made reference to August, and I told them, one of these programs, I said it's not possible, it's not going to happen in August. So my projection is still going to be next year. And I'm hopeful that it comes on next year. I'm not even looking at the first quarter of next year, probably mid next year. But hopefully they prove me wrong, and then by first quarter of next year, the refineries start working. And then there will be competition, and then we start looking at what is going to be at play. And one of the challenges that Petron are also worried about, because NNPC refinery comes up, and NNPC have thousands of outlets. They're also worried that Aliko Dangote's refinery may also decide to have thousands of outlets, and then Petron may be out of their members will be suffocated out of the market. So I think Petron should be planning on how to withstand that, because it's going to happen.
Okay, Mr. Esele, let's look at the business side of this thing. Yes, we've been looking at the business side, but let's look at the business side of this whole thing. So the private fuel station owners are looking to make money.
Yes.
Of course, the owner of Dangote Refinery is looking to make money. The other refineries that we have, I mean, there's a private refinery in Edo State. They're looking to make money. There are other licensees that have not even started building their refineries are also looking to make money. The Nigerian government that owns the Port Harcourt, the Kaduna, and I think the Warri refineries, they're also looking to make money. So what would it take for them to look at a collaboration? The most important thing is to reduce the burden or serve the Nigerian people who right now are buying fuel at between 1,090 naira and 1,500, even if you find it. And so you go to a lot of places, even at this cost, there are still a lot of queues there. You think it's impossible for them to come together and say, okay, this is what we want to do, and this is how we're going to achieve this?
You see, if you want me to be very blunt here, it's not the business. It's not the business of Aliko Dangote or NNPC or BOA to make life easy for the ordinary Nigerians. It's not their business. Their business is to set up a business and make profit. So the responsibility of making life easier for ordinary Nigerians and to mitigate the challenge of subsidy is the responsibility of those that were elected by the people. So those who were elected by the people are to look at this. Okay, we've taken subsidy away. And when subsidy is gone, there are challenges that comes up because of subsidy removal. So how do you now mitigate those challenges that come up? So first, they are talking about cash transfer. We've had the Buhari administration also talked about cash transfer. And in doing cash transfer, we were seeing ministers carry money in their bag and be handing it over. That is archaic. First thing is that where is the database that you will use to put money in the pocket of Nigerians? That's one. Then secondly is that you have to look at the cost. All the complaints that you and I, everybody is making is as a result of transportation. Cost of moving goods and services has skyrocketed. So as a result, if you go to the market, you are going to spend so much more money. So if we have an omnibus plan between the federal, state, and local government, where they will agree and say, okay, fine, this is quantum amount of money we are going to invest in transport system. You know what we have in Nigeria. Take, for example, Lagos. What you have is I would call it National Union of Road Transport Workers' way of moving people. It's not a system. A system is an integrated transport network that will move goods, move services, and independent of itself. So we don't have that. So until we invest in all of that, that is the only way you start making life easier for the people. So to think that businesses will collaborate and make life easier for Nigerians, please bury that thought. Businessmen are in business to make money, and the kind of businessmen we have in Nigeria are the core capitalist, core one. So that's where government comes in. Even the ones you have in America, you see American government is always intervening. Their regulators are always up to speed because they understand that businessmen are only after profit.
I mean, I love the fact that people keep asking us questions to ask you online. But I'm going to pick this one. Someone said the only way you can sell fuel cheaper is if you stole the crude. The only way you can sell petrol cheaper than what Dangote is selling is if you stole the crude and they turned it into petrol and then you brought it back, so you didn't bear the cost of buying crude. It's only if you stole the crude. What do you make of that thought process? Is it possible?
The person has a point, because if you are telling me you are going to bring a product, I'll give you an example. How much is a liter of petrol sold in Ghana? Because Ghana imports product. So the Ghanaian economy is based on importation of petrol. So the average price for a liter of petrol in Ghana is 1,500. Thereabout. Maybe 1,480 something naira. That's the average price of a liter of petrol in Ghana. So if somebody comes and he says he's going to sell at 800 naira, then you need to ask the person, where is he getting it from? And then he also has to do a lot of calculations based on the fact that the petrol or crude is sold in USD.
Going forward, we are where we are. Going forward, what should we expect as a Nigerian people? How do we navigate this? Or should we just ignore these people talking and just buy petrol and keep it moving?
My advice to Nigerians is to hold those that they have elected to stand up for them. To stand up for them, to be able to regulate what is going on between Aliko and the Dangote refinery and Petra. At the end of the day, I'll use your sentence. It's just jostling for position. At the end of the day, it's still all about market share, market price, and profit taking or profit making. That's what it is. So it is for government to look at Nigerians and say, how do we mitigate all of this pain? How do we make things easier for Nigerians? Aside of that, let's just allow Petra and Dangote be jostling for the market share, and then allow the regulators should wake up to their responsibility, so that at the end of the day, Nigerians don't suffer more than they're already doing. But it's our reality now.
Oh well, Mr. Saleh.
I'm sorry if giving you the actual truth the way it is maybe weigh you down, but I just have to tell you the way it is.
We appreciate the truth.
Mr. Saleh,
doesn't make it not hurt.
The truth is appreciated. It's not weighing us down. But again, we look at the options. Like a comment we have, it says, Malta monopoly or Nigeria monopoly, choose wisely. Though don't support monopoly, let us look inwards on our resources and see how best we can manage our resources. Thank you once again, Mr. Peter Esele. He's a former president of the Trade Union Congress and the former president of the Pengasan. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us this morning. Sunrise Daily will be back in a moment. Just stay with us.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Business Morning on Sunrise Daily. We do business for just about 30 minutes before we head back to the Sunrise Daily studio. I'm Amy John McQuarrie. We'll start with the performance of the Naira at the close of trade yesterday. We see an inverse relation between NAFEX and NAFEM. So while NAFEX gained 3 Naira to close at 1,661 Naira 51 kobo, that's NAFEX. We saw that for NAFEM, that was on the inverse. It lost 0.61%. A lot of people have said this is the first loss in the month of November, but does it make a whole lot of difference? We've been hovering around 1,006 for a bit now, getting close to 1,007 after losing the 1,005 about 3 weeks or so ago. So we saw a drop right there for NAFEM. It lost 10 Naira 18 kobo, and we know this is the major market when we talk about the official market. Anticipating perhaps intervention from the central bank, that is one. Remember that the World Bank had asked the CBN to be more certain concerning its interventions. So sometimes we see the CBN looks at the market and intervenes, and other times they decide not to intervene. Perhaps a bit of certainty will also help interactions in the market and accumulation of FX in the country. Now, what Kayla and NT were talking about is the biggest news in the country at this time, especially because it concerns energy. Energy security is a major one. But first of all, let's start from the global space and tell you that oil prices traded in a narrow range on Tuesday ahead of what is expected to be an exceptionally close United States presidential election. Today is the D-Day for the U.S. when they will choose their next president. So for the oil, after rising more than 2% in the previous session as OPEC Plus delayed plans to hike production in December. Look at the numbers right here. We've seen a bit of gain on Brent. So remember about this time yesterday it was at 74. So it gained, and then now we see it dropped 0.04%, $75.05 a barrel, while WTI is down 0.06% at $71.43 a barrel. So the U.S. election is the big deal today. Still, risk-taking remains limited with a busy, very busy one. Federal Reserve meeting also this week. China's National People's Congress meeting is also this week. You know, more information about the stimulus is what we are expecting. So for now, the polls suggest that the United States presidential race will be closely contested, and any delay in election result or even disputes could pose near-term risks for broader markets or dragging them for longer. We've seen traders exhibiting a lot of uncertainty, you know, because of this tightness. There seems to be no clear winner at this time, even from the polls. So that makes it really hard for investors. And then back here in Nigeria, we've seen yesterday that Dangote Refinery, they reacted to what they describe as misinformation by the Independent Petroleum Marketers Association of Nigeria, as well as the Petroleum Products Retail Outlet Owners Association, that's Petron, on the price of PMS imported into the country. In a statement signed by the Group Chief Branding and Communications Officer, Mr. Anthony Chejina, Dangote Refinery challenged claims by several bodies that they can land PMS at a cheaper price, raising concerns about possible importation of substandard products and connivance with international traders to dump low-quality products into the country. Dangote Refinery says post deregulation, the NNPC set the pace of selling PMS to domestic marketers at 971 Naira for a litre for sale into ships and 990 Naira for sale into trucks, which set the benchmark for their pricing at 960 naira for a litre, 4 ships, while maintaining 990 into the litre for sale into trucks. Now, there's been a reaction to that from Petron, that's the Petroleum Products Retail Outlet Owners Association of Nigeria. They're disputing that allegation made by Dangote Refinery that its marketers intend to import standard petrol products at a cheaper rate. In a statement released, the association says that it has concluded plans with its foreign refinery counterparts and financial partners to import the best quality of PMS and then sell for far less than the present selling price. Petron adds that it plans to enter into the market before December, pending the approval of an imports permit license. I think they call it petrol. That's what they intend to call it. So awaiting that. Now, let's delve into this and try to understand. I know you heard part of this conversation with Mr. Isele right there on Sunrise Daily, but let's look at the business angle, perhaps more details right now with the Chief Executive Officer of Financial Derivatives Company, Mr. Bismarck Rwani. Joins us to understand what's going on, because at the end of the day, it does seem like the consumers are just there getting hit from one side or the other. As Mr. Isele said, businesses are there to make money. So who is covering or protecting the interests of the consumer in all of this? Mr. Rwani, good morning and thank you for your time.
Good morning and thank you for having me.
So it does seem like there's no end to this issue of quality of petroleum products, pricing of it, and now Petrol is telling us that they can get it cheaper. Dangote is saying, well, consumers beware, you might just be trading quality for pricing. I mean, what do you know about this? Can you help us to understand the full scenario?
First of all, let me state clearly that there's no controversy here. There's a complete misconception of price and cost. The cost of producing a product and the price at which you sell it may not be exactly the same and will never be the same. There's a cost plus margin, which anybody who is producing has to produce at a point where its marginal cost equals its marginal revenue. That is standard economics. Secondly, you do not expect in an industry of this nature, where there's about a $25 to $27 billion investment in a refinery, for that refinery, which has capacity for 650,000 barrels a day, to be the price follower. The price leader in that industry is the man who has a dominant position. And in this case, the Dangote refinery has about a 90 to 95% market share. Therefore, they will be the price leader. The under cannot be the price follower. And let us get that clear. That is the issue. The issue is that let us not forget that a year ago or 2 years ago, people were queuing up. There was no quantity, there was no quality, there was no supply, and there was uncertainty and anxiety. Somebody has invested $25 to $27 billion over the past 5-6 years, taking risks, sovereign risk, credit risk, market risk, currency risk, and now decides to actually establish a price. And he's the price leader. The other guys who are importing as price followers, and it's dependent on whether we do not know what the source of that, where the products are coming from. And we do not know the intent of whoever is dumping on Nigeria, on the Nigerian market. So let's establish one thing clearly. One is that there is a cost of doing business. Two, there's a format for a template for determining the price. And three, there's a market share which determines who is the price leader and who is the price follower. I think that has to be. Yes. All
right. So this issue of imported, I mean, and I know it shows even in the real sector, imported products being cheaper than domestically refined products. That I think is a worrying factor, because even though on the face level we might see the price is is cheaper for imported products, then we now talk about the pressure on the naira. We just saw the naira; it keeps losing value. We're now heading to 1,700.
No, I think that's currencies by nature, and the currency market is a volatile market. There are many things that goes into the goes into determining what the value of the currency is, whether it's misaligned temporarily or it's misaligned almost structurally. So the question is that in that price of petrol, or PMS as we call it, there is the cost of price of oil, there's the exchange rate at which it's exchanged, and finally, there are market structures and logistics of moving stuff from the refinery to the market. That has to be established. And one thing I want to bring to the attention of all the viewers here is that the price of diesel, which is a major factor that is a contributing factor for inflation in the country, the price of diesel was as high as 1,900 about a year ago. The Dangote refinery was able to produce diesel and bring it down to 900. It's now at about 1,100 naira. The diesel price is deregulated. The market is open for everybody, and none of these marketers or born-again patriots had actually come to complain when the price of diesel was brought down because of the intervention of the refinery. I think that let's establish that clearly. Now, there is a crisis of false expectation. People thought that, and kept on saying that when the Dangote refinery is commissioned, the world, night will become day and day will become night. That is not the truth. Only two things were guaranteed by the refinery working. One, quality of the products. Two, quantity. What the Dangote refinery or any other refinery for that matter, including Warri refinery, Port Harcourt and others, they cannot guarantee you price because the price is not controlled by them. The price is determined by factors which include oil price, exchange rate, and other things. So what we are getting is cost plus margin, and what we are getting is quantity guaranteed. What we are getting is quality guaranteed. What we cannot determine and what the producer cannot determine is the price at which you sell, because that is outside their control. However, having said that, if the cost is higher than the price, then that creates a subsidy. If the price is higher than the cost, that gives you a margin. And that's how the business, and this business is a high volume, low margin business all over the world. And that's how refineries are run.
All right, Mr. Irani, help us to understand the status of subsidy. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, what should the regulator be doing? Because I believe the regulator is the one who should be speaking for consumers in the midst of these businessmen's conversations.
Well, first and foremost, basic economic rules are that subsidies are reverse taxes. If you increase subsidies, you reduce the tax on the people. If you reduce subsidies, you increase the tax. There are certain fundamental rules of taxation. But you need tax, right, to run the country. And therefore, if you take away, as we have said, the subsidies have been reduced, it means that the government revenue has increased. Now the question is, what has the government done with that money that it has received? Now, and that's a question of morality, it's a question of governance, it's a question of transparency. And that's not the issue today, is that subsidies are not afforded. Nigeria cannot afford the subsidies and have to do something about it. But at the same time, Nigeria cannot afford for subsidy revenues to be filtered away or stolen or misappropriated. So you have two things. One, subsidies that are being removed, and two, the subsidies and the revenues that have accrued to the government, how is it being used or how is it being blocked from being stolen? So those are the things. So if you want to bring in a question of subsidies into the question of pricing and cost of production of refined products, it clouds the air and makes the discussion more complex than it should be. So I like to separate the issue of what is the cost of producing a liter of petrol and what is the price at which we will sell the petrol, and what is the exchange rate at which the importers are bringing. When you address all of these issues, we come up with what we call a cost-efficient price.
So now the other issue in the economy at this time, Mr. Irani, would like for you to help us understand is the issue of the tax reform bill. Unfortunately, it seems to have turned into a regional conversation. The northern governors are asking that the tax reform be withdrawn. you know, and then the tax reform is actually supposed to bring up a more transparent and efficient tax system in the country. But I mean, the conversation these days, but we've heard the presidency now say that, I mean, they're not going to withdraw it and all of that. Let's just try to understand a bit of it, which is the proposed reforms, Mr. Arwani. The statutory now is that for value-added tax, you have for 2024 supposed to be 7.5%. From next year, implementation was supposed to start in January. Now we don't know the status. It's supposed to get up to 10%, and then 2026 to 2029, 12.5, and 2030, 15. Then the company income tax, which is at 30 now, is supposed to go down to 25, and further down in 2026 to 25%, and all of that. So help us to understand. I think we have another slide on the controversy. If we could have that slide before Mr. Arwani will react to it. On the controversy, this objective 0% VAT on food and education. And Mr. Oyedele has been on our program, various programs, a couple of times, explaining how they're supposed to make the basics to have less VAT. You know, these are the basics that people need to live on. And so we said, but we have the controversy. Can we see the one on the controversy that seems to be raising all of the dust that we've been having in the country? There you have it. So controversies around VAT. Federal government currently gets 15%. They're proposing 10%. State government get 50%. Now state governments are supposed to get even more. Local governments get 35%. That's supposed to stay. And out of the 90% of subnational, 60% is supposed to be shared on derivative, where consumption to place, while 40% to be shared based on fact sharing. In essence, what this is supposed to do is let's trace the source of the revenue and let that state get even more, unlike what we have now, where, you know, everything is sent to the center and then everybody gets, you know, some kind of equal share. So Mr. Arwani, please help us to understand what's the problem with this? What's the controversy? What are some of the pros and cons of it?
Well, Ini, the point is here that two things are certain in life, and they say, our economists say, death and taxes. Those are the only two things that you cannot change. At the end of a life, somebody dies. At the end of earning your income, you pay your tax. Those are the two things that are certain. Now, taxation is a controversial issue. There are what we call the canons of taxation. But the reality here is that, one, the burden of taxation, the incidence of tax, rests somewhere. And what these proposals are saying is that the burden of tax on people actually reduces because you are paying less at the end of the day, both at the corporate level, the individual level, and the various incentives, right? But the reality is that the lower the tax rate, the higher the compliance rate. That is, people pay more because the incidence of tax is lower. Secondly, if people see that the money that they are paying as taxation is used efficiently, there's an incentive to pay. So we are dealing with a couple of things. Let us first of all start by saying that the VAT, the exemptions are so much that people, the ordinary man, will pay less, and that is what the tax reform is saying. Two, that the federal government that was taking 15% of all the taxes collected, of all the VAT collected, is now going to get only 10%. Three is that it doesn't just go to the state, it goes to the federal government, the local governments. And so the question is, how much are they going to collect? And the most important part of this reform is that VAT today, if Nigerian breweries is producing beer in Lagos and sends out the beer to Kaduna or to Port Harcourt, the VAT is, in the derivation policy, the VAT accrues to Lagos State, not to where it is, where the consumer is. Not, this new proposal says that the VAT is going to go to the state where it's consumed, and that is where the man who is buying it is, you know, he's the one that bears the burden of the tax, and he should get the benefit of the tax derivation. So what it means, therefore, is that Nigerian breweries or Guinness or Dangote will send out invoices, to their distributors. And from the address of the distributor, you know exactly the state where that consumption is taking place. So this is a much more efficient, more equitable, fairer, and easier to administer tax, the way it is being proposed. Therefore, there's no reason, as a matter of fact, there's no reason why the states should go against it. I think there's a lack of understanding or lack of communication of the true objective and the process itself. So I believe that when this is understood fully, right, then there'll be a what I call a compromise, not even a compromise. There'll be an alignment of goals, right, and strategy. Don't forget, an objection is a request for further information. The objection which the state governors and the NEC have, they objected to it and said, okay, President Tinubu, please withdraw it. Now it's up to President Tinubu and his team to give further information. So like I always say, an objection is a request for further information. When the information is available, people will now agree and be aligned. And at the end of the day, everybody will benefit from it because these taxation principles are there. And another thing you must note is that under the proposal, whatever you acquire, if you acquire any assets, say for example, a telecom company acquires generators and all of that for its base stations, he is allowed to recover all of this. He will get all of these things back. So ordinarily, he would have paid a VAT of say 10%. He gets everything back. It becomes zero because he gets that capital allowance for acquiring that asset. Now, and what does that mean? It means that a telecom company that has spent so much, right, acquiring assets and capital spend, and at this time is not allowed or has not been given the freedom to alter its tariffs, will have that as one of the benefits. And I come back to the other issue when it comes to taxation. You can alter the tax policy, but the government must allow the guys who are producing these services, especially the telco companies, to alter and be able to charge appropriately their tariffs. Because right now, if you look at the results that are being issued across all sectors, almost everybody is reporting massive foreign exchange losses. This cannot continue because the tax you pay corporate income tax on profits, not on losses. Therefore, the corporate income tax that will be collected this year for 2023 and next year for 2024 is going to be much, much lower. And that will actually impede the government's ability to fund transactions, to fund their activities and provide welfare for the Nigerian people. So it's very important that we know this. Yeah,
so and I see that one of the plans of the reform is a reduction in a company income tax so that profits will be higher and then companies can thrive better. But you did allude to the fact that perhaps what we need is more enlightenment, the media and all of that. So I guess at this time, even though the president has insisted that the reform bill will not be withdrawn, it's now left to the committee, the Tayo Yedele committee, to go around and try to get the buy-in, perhaps help them to understand some of these things more. I guess that's where we should be at this time.
No, to be honest, I think the sensationalism of the journalists saying that the president will not withdraw the bill and trying to create a conflict where there's none. Like I said, an objection is a request for further information. The governors have a right to say, look, we do not understand this. Can you explain it further? The president has a responsibility to explain it further and to let people know what the benefits are. If it has not been well communicated, then communicate it again and keep on saying it again until everybody understands, because that's the responsibility of leadership. That's one. Two, the president and his team have to understand clearly that people want to be sure that when the revenues are collected, it is not filtered away, it is not wasted, it is not spent on things that will not benefit the people. So there are two things here. One, communicate the tax reform. Two, ensure that the monies that are being received from taxation are being judiciously spent for things that people can see, because there is a definite correlation between when people see that their money is being well used, there's an incentive to pay taxes. When people see that the money that is being paid is not being judiciously used, there is an incentive to evade tax, avoid tax, in fact, or just, what we call filter, keep your money with yourself rather than to be non-compliant and maliciously obedient.
I think another interesting part, Mr. Ruwani, is where the new process, the reform is supposed to help the recoup of VAT, the refund on VAT to be faster and maybe more transparent. I think that's also another interesting part that could be highlighted for acceptance.
No, I didn't get that question clearly.
One of the reform is supposed to help the refund of VAT or VAT to be faster and less bureaucracy around it. I guess that's another part that could make the reform attractive or as an incentive for paying taxes.
Yes, again, I keep on saying, the fundamental principles of taxation, as far back as the time of Adam Smith, were very clear. Taxes have to generate revenue. They have to be easy to administer. They have to be neutral in terms of allocation of resources, and they have to be equitable. That is, the rich should pay more than the poor. But the reality in life is that the taxes that are what we call the benefit approach, where you pay as you receive the benefit, like in VAT, or you pay the tax at the supermarket and all of that. Those ones, the same amount, I will pay the same tax as my driver, and the same thing, Bill Gates will pay the same level of taxation, and no matter how rich Bill Gates is or how poor I am compared to Bill Gates. So we pay the same tax, but it's easy to administer. If you have to, actually measure and say that you are going to charge Bill Gates so much and charge me so much, it is so difficult to administer, and you will spend half of your time administering it rather than generating revenue. So the easy thing to do is to apply it across board, but also to insist that the money that is collected for taxation is used for the benefit of the vulnerable rather than for the benefit of the wealthy. But having said that, I think that we should not confuse a revenue problem for a growth problem. Nigeria has more of a growth investment problem than a revenue problem. Revenue you can use to pay your cost, you can use that to amortize people, you can use it to incentivize investors. But really, the problem is that the Nigerian economy is underperforming today because its potential GDP actually is higher than its real GDP growth rate. And that's an abstract economic principle that we have to discuss. But for today, and the purpose of this discussion, we are talking about taxes, we are talking about subsidies, which are reverse taxes, we are talking about efficient pricing of petroleum products, the Dangote refinery as an example, and we're also talking about allowing the telcos to actually have freedom to increase their tariffs and let it be market, cost efficient, and allow them to invest in the technology, because every time they invest in capex, 5G and all the other things, AI technology, productivity increases. And when there's an increase in output of goods and services, then you have a fighting chance to bring inflation down. Inflation is a real problem that is confronting this country today.
Yeah, inflation is the real problem. We'll keep fighting it. Just before we let you go, Mr. Ruwani, could you bring us up to speed on what's going on with commodities? Christmas is around the corner. We see palm oil. Some things seem unmoved. Palm oil, semovita, new yam, but sugar is up. Wheat. Could you give us what's going on behind the scene for commodities, domestic commodities, that is?
Yes, commodities. The problem now is that Christmas is in about 5 weeks from now. And we are seeing a couple of things. One, the import duty waiver, the goods are just coming in, and there's some bureaucracy at the ports. But we're still seeing rice at 120,000. We're seeing flour at 65,000. We are seeing, we are seeing beans up. We are also seeing the new yam is flat at 3,000. And semovita is flat at 6,700. So the yellow is 6,700, but the actual price is about 16,500. Palm oil is flat at 37,500. Actually, the palm oil price is flat at 37,500. Sorry. So that is where we are. With commodity prices, there are seasonal factors. The Christmas is here, the duty waiver is here, and then the logistics of moving the products to the market, which is driven by the price of petrol on one hand, but more importantly by the price of diesel. So what do we see? We think that all things considered, we do not see the price of these commodities reducing during the Christmas period, which is the month of December. So what I think is going to happen is that the federal government will probably extend the date of the duty waiver, which was January 1, for another month or two, to allow people bring in the products, bring down the prices. And then what happens normally after Christmas and New Year is that prices begin to come down. So if you are somebody who is looking at the long term, I wouldn't buy the turkey or the chicken for Christmas. I'll wait and buy after Christmas. So probably you will have a happy after Christmas and a kind of sober before Christmas.
Mr. Rwanda, I don't know how you convince the children to do that, to wait until after Christmas before you buy the chicken or the turkey. I'm not sure you hear the last of it. Well, thank you so much for your time and your views on the program this morning, Mr. Bismarck Rwanda.
2024 is a different year.
Okay, all right. We're looking forward to that. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so just before we head out yesterday, the negative sentiment continued at the NGX. The market was down, lost over 300 billion naira and losing both the 97,000 level and the 59 trillion level. So it was a red market yesterday. Aradel contributed a whole lot to this, even though O&O also added, but profit taking still hasn't ended on Aradel. But the good thing is, still in the oil and gas sector, a company just shot up, and we see it since last week. It's been doing the top trades. That's Unicel. Unicel is a domestic company, thank God for that, and they're into oil production and all of that. And we just see interest around it. I guess we have to investigate, are they connected to Dangote or Aradel? Have to find out. But top trades yesterday, we see Cornhall and UBA, Sterling, Nigeria all also. But it was a red market. We hope to see a bit of recovery, perhaps, since prices have dropped. Some investors will want to take advantage or take position for that. Will is back. That's good to know. So you see her give you update from the market at 1 p.m. So she'll be here at 1 p.m. with Ladi Williams. They'll be doing 55 minutes of business with you. I'll be doing behind the scene. I'm Ini John Mekwa. Let's head back to the Sunrise Daily Studio.
Welcome back. Yes, we just, in that space, Ini was talking all the money, and she didn't really talk taxes, the tax reform.
She mentioned
that. She just teased it and then moved away. Started talking about what we're talking about, the petroleum industry. That is one matter that every Nigerian tends to talk about. Practically, you cannot have a conversation with a Nigerian in the last 1-2 years and he'll not tell you how much is petrol. How much is gas? How much is electricity? Are you on band A or band B? But our conversation at this point in time is not just about petrol. Let's talk about things that will help you get petrol, because you need to be healthy for you to be able to get petrol or buy the electricity. And to look at the health sector, currently the ministry and the coordinating minister of health and his team, they're doing like a review of what they've done in the last 1 year or thereabout. Has there been positives? Have there been positives? Are there takeaways? Are there things that we should be looking forward to? These are some of the conversations we'll be having today. And we have here in the studio Dr. Muntaka Umar Sadiq, who's the National Coordinator of the Sector-Wide Approach Program. It's a Federal Ministry of Health and Social Welfare Initiative. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much for having me.
So, Dr. Umar Sadiq, 1 year down the line, What would you say if I ask you, would you say there's been an improvement in access to health for Nigerians if we look at, say, let's just say approximately 200 million Nigerians and health? How would you put it? Would you say there's been an improvement in the access to health for Nigerians?
Well, thank you very much for having me. I think first there's a context to this, and I will in fact answer your question, because nearly a year ago, December last year, Mr. President unveiled our Nigeria Health and Renewal Investment Initiative. So I wanted to just give some context and make everyone understand what we signed up for, what the expectations are. Because at the heart of Mr. President's Renewed Hope agenda really is the well-being and health of Nigerians, right? Mr. President has really spoken to the fact that the health sector is the basis for accumulating our human capital, essentially what you're speaking about. So unlocking both the full potential of our people as well as the full potential of our economy. So this really provides the backdrop for the commitments that he has really shown in the health sector, increasing the budgetary allocations, his personal time in being the AU champion for human resource for health. And I think this goodwill is what the Coordinating Minister of Health and Social Welfare has really drawn from to articulate this vision to save lives, reduce financial and physical pain, and to produce health, and to do so for all Nigerians. So to your questions around access, absolutely, our aspiration is around universal health coverage. But the business of advancing reforms within the context of 240 million Nigerians take time. But today, rather than talking about what we signed up to last year, we're here with our scorecard. So I'll be talking numbers with you, and we're really excited about this.
I was actually hoping that you start out with the numbers and go to...
No, because I think that the context is quite important. Yeah. And let me say this, because achieving this bold transformation requires our collective understanding of the hows. And there are 4 important hows. The Coordinating Minister has outlined 1, prioritizing building effective governance, right? And that means working with states and local governments around fostering accountability and responding to the yearnings and expectations of Nigerians. And earlier we spoke about the Citizens' Voices survey. That's essentially why we did that. But the second important pillar is strengthening our health systems to improve population health outcomes. You asked about access. I'll be talking about how we have improved not just the revitalization of our primary healthcare systems, but maternal and child health conditions, basic services, malaria, infectious diseases, but also how that has been complemented by some of the work from the health insurance, because there's a nexus between the supply and demand side to meet the yearnings of Nigeria. The third is the fact that if you recall what happened during COVID, the vulnerability of our health system is such that we need to ensure that we unlock the value chain so that we enhance our local manufacturing, take the health sector from being an economic drag to one that is a net contributor of economic growth. So local manufacturing, so that we're not depending on anyone when it comes to our basic commodities and supplies. And the fourth is really around health security. And we've had some progress around each of these paradigms. And there are 4 ways to report back these expectations. One is around outcomes, because in our world, the currency for health sector performance is how many lives saved, right? So we want to talk about some of the outcomes. And there we have seen from this report, which coincides with the 2023 demographic and health survey, 42,000 households, so very rigorous sampling. So I'm not talking about me, it's third-party verification. We've complemented this by a Citizens' Voices survey, 2,600 Nigerians across the country to understand their perceptions. And so when I say that in terms of outcomes, we are down 17% in terms of under 5 mortality. We have done quite well, actually, in terms of infectious diseases. Diarrheal diseases, down 40%. TB, 24%. HIV, 12%. Malaria, quite marginal, 5%. But also, in terms of routine immunization, slightly up, but we're not happy with where we are in terms of what we call zero-dose immunization, a bit down. We see that we're also struggling when it comes to the affordability of care. Yeah. Some of what you said around the inflationary and FX pressures is also hitting us in the health sector. The costs of our medical commodities and drugs is really hitting in terms of financial protection. But we've also seen that the Health Insurance Agency has responded, because we are now up 14% from last year, right? We've gone from 16.7 million Nigerians having health insurance to 19.1. And this is third party that can be verified. This is in terms of outcomes. The second is the fact that we have a swap compact, a compact where Mr. President, all 36+1 governors, as well as 17 development partners, signed up to a few expectations, a joint accountability framework, if you like, quarterly dialogues with our states, the amount of commitment in terms of the financing for health. And there we can report back that out of the 40 core indicators that we signed up to in terms of our presidential bond, 31 have been exceeded by Q3 this year. We hope that by the end of the year, we would have done better.
These successes you're reeling out are just between December and now.
So these successes I'm reeling out are 2 time periods. One is for the last 12 months, right? So the things around the perception surveys from Nigerians is 1 year. The NHI, the health insurance, we're talking 1 year. But there are others that require, household surveys of 42,000. That was from 2018 to the end of 2023.
So I want us to be able to focus on the unveiling, because that happened in December last year.
Correct.
And that's what you're basically honing in on, the Health Sector Renewal Investment Initiative through a sector-wide approach. I want to be able to look at the successes that you've recorded between December and, because almost a year, it'll be a year next month, the successes and the challenges that have been faced in this initiative that was unveiled by the president.
Okay. So what we unveiled by the president is a combination of a few things. It is a new paradigm of doing business, so expectations as to our interface with states. We've had quarterly dialogues with states. We agreed on having states have annual operating plans that reflect our government's priorities. All states have done that. We agreed to revitalize some primary healthcare centers. Our aspiration is to go from 8,800 to 17,000. We found in our survey that lower than 1/3 of these facilities are functional. So the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency has worked to revitalize those facilities. And I'll give you the numbers. So far in the last 1 year, 239 facilities have been renovated.
Okay.
319 are work in progress currently. As you know, the remit of primary healthcare is local governments and states. The NPHCD has worked with states to take on 2,600 facilities. And under the sector-wide approach, through our partnerships and pooling resources for several other partners, we are targeting an additional 2,000 facilities over the next 3 years. These are real facilities that over the next few days, we are inviting CSOs, states, to verify, to ensure that we are on that path to accelerate improvement in health outcomes.
Working with stakeholders, especially because you're heading the sector-wide approach, which means that you have to deal with subnationals. You also have to deal with a lot of stakeholders. What sort of collaborations have you made on that level, and what challenges do you face in getting more of the results that are expected of you?
The sector-wide approach, which we call SWAP, really responds to the structural and systemic challenges that we have seen in the health sector for decades. And that's everything from inadequate and inequitable financing to our data issues, but also, and more importantly, the poor governance. And so the hyperfragmentation, the poor coordination between federal, states, and in fact, the lack of accountability structure to define the expectations and the rules of engagement between federal and states. And so when I say that we have had all governors sign a code of conduct, sign core indicators, sign a compact, I believe it's the first time where we're being very clear with states that we're going to meet quarterly and look at your results. Look at where you are in terms of maternal, neonatal, and child health interventions, where you are in terms of the revitalization of your facilities, and undertake a performance management systems so that we are all rowing in the same direction. The coordinating minister calls it our North Star. And so that's how that has worked. But in addition, the sector-wide approach really is around improving governance, converging resources, because we have, on the one hand, outlined our priorities. We want to make sure that the funding of states and development partners align with these priorities. And so some of the work that we have done is to identify the local governments. There are about 172 local governments, so we've gone beyond states, to understand where 50% of our maternal deaths come from. They're just 172 local governments. And we, over the next few days, will be
50% of our maternal deaths come from 172 local governments.
Correct.
That's what you've discovered.
Yes.
The bulk of the locations of the local governments were?
They are actually interspersed. So it is roughly 19 states.
Okay.
But at least this subnational targeting means that over the next few days during the joint annual review, we will be announcing what we call the MAMI initiative, right? So that we are localizing the issues, we are responding with both the demand side issues, and we have seen that much of the issues are actually around education, child spacing, some that have nothing to do with the health sector. And in fact, we're partly pleased that the Minister of State for Health and Social Welfare is now our new Minister of Education. And so we hope to work closely together to ensure some of the demand side barriers in terms of education, but also the coverage issues and the quality of our skilled birth attendants are covered as part of this initiative, in addition to innovative tools and commodities to crash down maternal mortality.
Nelta, you know, there's a report they say they're coming up with at the end of the week, and it's called the State of the Nigerian
Report. State of the Health of Nigerians
State
report.
of the Health of Nigerians Report. What does that mean, really? And what, since the report is going to be launched during the week, what's its content? And I want to hear the name again, the State of the Health of the Nigerian Report.
Yes, it is called the State of the Health of Nigerians Report. And
when
just
you
to
say
say,
state of health, is it my mental health, my physical health, with everything I'm going through? What does that mean, really?
Okay. So I mentioned earlier that for us, what we're solving for is not just about saving lives, it's about reducing the physical, financial pain, including the mental pain that Nigerians go through. And I wanted to add too, that the name of this report, as laborious as it sounds, the State of Health of Nigerians Report, comes from our law. It comes from the National Health Act. Right? And this is the first time that we're implementing this law to the letter. And so the 40 indicators that we are reporting against over the next few weeks includes everything from infectious diseases, non-communicable diseases, as well as other important outputs. And in fact, the code of conduct, the behaviors that we expect of states and our development partners. And I've mentioned that in addition to this independent survey that was done, we have gone around to get the perspectives of Nigerians. And they're telling us that apart from affordability, other things like health system performance was quite positive. Utilization was up. Their expectations around the quality of service has actually improved from last year. Particularly, the capacity of the government to respond to epidemics was up roughly 17% in terms of their expectation. We know that there's a lot more to be done. We're not happy with where we are in terms of stunting, in terms of aspect of routine immunization, and at least there's clarity as to what we're going to focus on over the next few years.
I mean, the conversation around stunting came up in the past week, so to speak, because of a lot of things that were going on in the country. And just so people can understand what stunting really means and the places that are highly affected by stunting and the impact it's having on the populations of those areas. Maybe you could share a little bit of your experience with us dealing with people who are suffering from stunting.
So I think we need to also acknowledge that there are social determinants to health sector performance. There are certain things that come from the interplay between what we do within the health sector and the facilities. And there are a few things where things like the quality of our nutritional intakes. So what happens in terms of food security as well. But we know too that malnutrition, roughly 2 out of 5 Nigerians really have issues with malnutrition, and it's one of the biggest causes of death. And so we're really prioritizing this. It has an impact in terms of cerebral agility, educational attainment, productivity. And so the lives of our children, particularly in terms of all the complement of tools that they need, whether it is wasting or stunting, I think is a priority that we'll be discussing over the next few days. But I have to say that already there are interventions through our partners in World Bank and the ministry itself deploying more resources at the front lines to ensure that we increase and address some of these stunting challenges.
I want to be able to take a look at the rollout of the malaria vaccine. Of course, we saw that it's supposed to start off with Kebi and Bielsa, and then it's also going to be just for children. They talk to us a bit about, you know, your office and what kind of collaborations you're doing to ensure that these malaria vaccinations reach. And we hear there's going to be more. More states are going to be involved by next year. So just what kind of collaborations are we looking at, and what challenges do you envisage?
Sure. Thank you very much for that question. I think from where I sit in the sector-wide coordination office, we walk through what we call a collective leadership, a network governance. So we work very closely with our brother and sister agencies, the National Primary Health Care Development Agency, and this is squarely, down their remit. But I want to speak a bit about it because I think it's quite topical right now. This report shows that there are marginal gains over the last few years. 5%, right, in terms of reduction of malaria, but in terms of ACTs, the treatment for it, also slightly up in terms of coverage. I say this because we see the R21 vaccine, and in fact there are two different vaccines, as a complement, one of a number of tools in our quiver to address our efforts to go from malaria control to malaria elimination, right? And so it may be that there are some states where the archetype of interventions will be a combination of case management, seasonal chemoprophylaxis, treated bed nets, and there are some states that vaccines, and for now we're talking 5 to 11 months, and it's not just one, it's a number. So there are lots of learnings. We need to build the capacity of our healthcare workers, right? We need to ensure that we learn how does this work in different topographies, in different vector etiologies as well. And so that is why we are focusing on states like Kebbi, huge disease burden, as well as Bayelsa, to learn before scaling up, because we think that this effort also has important paradigms around the cost, right? The important trade-offs. So we want to understand how will this work within all of the other options, and where does it make sense to scale that up? We're incredibly excited about having, for the first time, the ability to roll out such a vaccine in Nigeria. And I think I have to commend the Coordinating Minister of Health and Social Welfare to ensure that Nigeria is one of those countries that can test out the rollout of this initiative. But I know that my colleague, the ED of NPHCDA, is working with all of the stakeholders at the front line to ramp up the awareness and educate the people more in this direction.
There are two things that bother Nigerians a great deal: health and economy. And these are things Nigerians who want to get a lot of information about. You've reeled out some good successes here. One of the things that really, for me, it's about that 172 LGAs in 19 states, about 50% of. So that means we can say, okay, there's a target. We're headed somewhere. When we're done with this, we can now spread our nets to other areas of things, which is good. But you said something just now about capacity of our health workers. I don't know if there are any successes that have come from that angle, because I know that in the course of having conversations in the last 1 year, the ministry had talked about the capacity of the health workers in Nigeria. Also coupled with the fact that there are those who are the Japa syndrome. But then we also know that there are those who are coming out. So that area of capacity of the health personnel, what are we doing in that aspect?
In fact, that is another area that we have some gains to report in as well. And I'll tell you why. Across all the different levels, from Mr. President, who has invested personal time to be the African Union champion on human resource for health and community healthcare workers, he has given the directives to ensure that we train 120,000 frontline health workers over the course of his administration. That has now been done. We're at 43,000 today. So everything that we're discussing, integrated case management.
Break it down. So train 120,000. In the Nigerian universities, for instance. Hold on. No,
I'm with you.
So you break it, that's why I say break it down.
Yes.
We know that every year we have doctors, pharmacists, and all that graduating from the universities. So is it that kind of training, or this is specialized training for those who have already graduated and are working?
Thank you for the opportunity to clarify that. We are talking about retraining frontline health workers that are already in states working in facilities. We're solving for improving the quality of care that is delivered.
Okay.
Over the last decade, as you know, the tools and standards of care has been upgraded. What it means to treat malaria now in an integrated fashion, or epidemic responses, has moved. So we want to make sure that our frontline health workers are capacitated to do that. And in fact, that's why in our citizens' voices, we're seeing Nigerians reflect that sentiment. So out of 120,000 frontline health workers, and we're talking community healthcare workers, midwives, right, at the front lines, 43,000 have been trained so far. So we're absolutely on course to do that, to hit that target of 120,000. And the ED of Nigeria Primary Health Care Development Agency has been, in fact, talking about this. But you mentioned the pre-service training, so I wanted to talk a bit about that. The Coordinating Minister of Health and Social Welfare has, for the first time, doubled the quota. We recognize that there's an opportunity to ramp up production, right? If most of our workers, as you alluded to, go out of the country, JAPA syndrome, that means there's something that is positive happening in our schools, right? They're able to equip our medical students in a manner that they see value for them. So our response to that, through our managed migration policy, is what we call, diplomatic managed migration, such that we are ramping up the production so that even if some go out, there'll be enough available to do this. And I know over the last year, 2,500 doctors have been recruited. Doctors, nurses have been recruited to ensure that some of those priority local governments that we have identified have the complement of both human resource as well as equipment, innovative tools to deliver quality services that we think will help us crash maternal and neonatal mortality.
I do know that in the last 1 year, the cases or news of threats of strike actions have been focused more on security issues, not necessarily remuneration as much as that. So is that an area that this initiative is also looking into to ensure that the medical personnel, the doctors, the nurses, the midwives, all the personnel there are not seeking to go on strike because of remuneration or welfare, but issues of security? And will that also be addressed in all of this?
So the sector-wide approach, where I sit, we focus on what we call one plan, one budget, one report, and one conversation. However, we work very closely. In fact, we are institutionalized in the Federal Ministry of Health, so the directors, the departments of hospital services, and some of the leaders that are responsible for ensuring that the welfare and safety of our health workers, both in terms of remuneration, but more importantly, in terms of the incentives and the tools they need to deliver services. But I also wanted to use this opportunity to talk about all of the important actors, both NHIA, NCDC, MPACDA, that have worked collectively to ensure, and obviously with the guidance of Mr. President, that some of the yearnings of our health workers are kind of being met. And I know the Coordinating Minister will speak a bit more about some of that, all encompassed within our managed migration policy also going forward.
I mean, there's a joint annual review that's holding later this week. So talk to us a little bit, I think it's from the 6th to the 8th of this month. So what are your expected outcomes for this joint annual review?
So there are a few things that we want to do. I think we see the joint annual review as our basis for having one conversation in the health sector. We want to have a conversation where we're looking at one source of truth, because there's always the risk of having different data sources and framing our progress in multidimensional ways. So we want to have one source of truth so that we're being honest with ourselves about our performance, and we have a shared judgment around the impact that we have had, the lessons, and more importantly, how to respond. And so there are three things that we're looking for on the back of our joint annual review. The first is to review the state of the health of Nigerians report. We want to invite everyone to look at these numbers, verify it, tell us where we've gone wrong, help us build a coherent response to what we're doing. So I think that's one, reviewing our progress. The second is ensuring that we mobilize partnership to address the data issues that we're now seeing. So we're going to be calling on our partners so that these kinds of reports, rather than having it every 3 years, that we have it every single year, so that we solve our data problems once and for all. And the third thing is that given the issues or the areas where we know that we are struggling, the response to it, this MAMI initiative where we are prioritizing certain local governments and mobilizing resources of our partners and states so that we focus on the areas that have the biggest need and crash maternal and neonatal mortality drastically over the next few years. So I think that's why we're having this conversation. And I think a final piece is that we see the impact of climate in the health sector, and we will be launching a vulnerability assessment report during the joint annual review as well. I believe that we have actually the largest climate intervention initiative in health over the next year, and we're excited about that.
Climate seems to affect everything. Thank you so much, Dr. Muntaka Umar Sadiq. Thank you for coming in this morning.
Thank you very much for having me.
We wish you well during the review, and we hope at the end of the day, Nigeria's health indices will be high up there and in every area, as we say, sector-wide.
Thank you
again. Dr. Muntaka Umar Sadiq is the National Coordinator of the Sector-Wide Approach Program at the Federal Ministry of Health and Social Welfare. And just before we
have a few messages, I think. Yes,
yeah.
We have 2 messages. And I want to apologize for yesterday. We didn't take their messages yesterday. Apologies for not taking your messages yesterday, but we will get to your messages today. Festus Akimboyewa says, Nigeria must win the race for energy security in the country. We must be happy and proud that we have local refineries like Dangote refinery when refineries are closing down across the world. Nigeria must patronize and support local refineries. The federal government must not allocate our scarce dollars for the importation of PMS.
Okay, that's from Professor Kimwewa. Professor Imonuka Inahina says the ongoing impasse between Dangote Refinery Management and NNPCL must be fixed so that Nigerians can face the long, arduous task of rebuilding its petroleum sector and maintaining a moderation of its prices. There's shenanigans and political undertone in what's now bedeviling an institution whose working operations is shrouded in secrecy. If this sector based its prices of petroleum products on the prices of crude on the international turf, then we're in for a long, rough ride. Professor Inakena there.
And before we wrap up, just so you can get on with some of the breaking news that we have for you right now, the Attorney General of the Federation, of course, represented by the Director of Public Prosecution of the Federation, had announced, the exercise of his power of Section 174 of the 1999 Constitution to take over the case. Of course, we are referring to the protesters who were arraigned recently. So, of course, like we said earlier, the accused persons are not in court, and the judge has ordered their immediate release from prison. In fact, we are seeing here an update where the children, and that's what they're being referred to, are being moved to the Women Development Center, where they're going to be addressed by the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs. And we've been told that the media are not going to be covering that, but just so you can have that update there for you.
And that's all we have to sign out for today. Thank you for letting us be a part of your morning. Remember that where you are is a good place to start doing your own bit. Don't throw in the towel yet. Thank you for watching. I'm Neota Igbe.
I'm Kayla Megwa. Have a wonderful rest of your day.